Welcome to the Game and Gadget Podcast. Hello, I'm James Woodcock from Pixel Refresh, and today I have with me Tony Warriner, who gives a salute for those who listen to the audio-only podcast. That's a very formal. I never need to be saluted, but I appreciate it, Tony. And also with me, I have Aaron Fothergill, who's from a previous podcast as well. Welcome back, Aaron.
Buenos dias.
So Aaron is actually based in Spain. So we actually had great fun the other day working out when we were starting the podcast because you weren't sure it was UK, and then I altered it by 15 minutes, and then you realised it was Spanish time, so you were okay. So we got there in the end. Aaron is here, proof that we got there. And I guess we have to start with Tony. You're looking very clear.
Yeah.
Even a little less grumpy than usual, so I can only assume you've got your new MacBook Pro.
I have, yeah, and I just had to do a very.
Look, he's smiling. He's smiling.
that doesn't mean anything. No, I had to do a very. I suddenly realised, I thought, 10 to the hour. That's about right for setting up with the podcast. And I thought, oh my God, Google Chrome. I need to get Google Chrome installed, and then it's like. Oh no, there's no USB-A port, so I had to find a way of connecting the microphone, and this was all like super fast in the last 5 minutes. So yeah, I'm glad to be here.
You look remarkably chilled after all of that.
Yeah, chilled like the Mac itself, because it's absolutely. I was just saying, it's freezing cold. There's not a single Celsius of heat coming out the back of it.
That was not meant to be a segue into the temperature performance of your MacBook Pro, but very nicely strategically done there, Mr. Warren. I'm most impressed. So, have you got over the notch?
What notch? Oh, yeah, there it is.
I guess in your screen configuration, are you taking advantage of the extra pixels around the notch, or have you just brought everything down?
Well, I don't normally see it because I have a 4K monitor plugged into the computer, and the laptop is actually closed, so this is the first time I've actually used it looking at the screen. But I quite like it. I think it's quite I think it looks quite sophisticated. I like the way the little green light of the cam is slightly offset. It's a bit HAL actually for some reason. I quite like it. So it's a plus point. James.
And that screen's got to be beautiful. It's 120 hertz.
Yes.
It's HDR on steroids.
It's a nice screen, yeah. I mean, it's a shame not to use it more, actually. But I'm away next week, so I will be looking at this screen quite a lot. So I'll get to make a finer judgment then. But yeah, I'm mostly looking at an LG 4K monitor. So no notch on that.
Is that the LG one Apple were pushing alongside one of the earlier MacBooks?
No, I actually had one of those. I have one of the. I'm just about to sell it actually, but I have one of the last, the bad MacBook Pros, the thin one with the awful keyboard and the touch bar and the no ports thing going on, and that I thought I would. I thought the perfect way to run this machine is with the fancy 5K LG from Apple. Because the beauty of it was supposedly, you would run it off the USB power to so all you needed was one lead. Yeah, you could plug the Thunderbolt at one end and the monitor at the other, and it would charge the computer and it would run the monitor. And that was going to be the dream setup. And it wasn't, because the machine was so bad at dealing with its running off a monitor that it often in the mornings, when you wake your you sit down with your cup of coffee and you hit the keyboard and say "wake up, computer," and it would often not work. You have to faff about to get the monitor to connect up. So it was a nightmare. And that was one of those fancy 5Gs, which you can't buy anymore. And in fact, when it comes to it, because I ditched that and went to an iMac, a fancy iMac, a couple of years ago, which obviously is a nice big 5K screen as well. And now, if you try and buy a 5K monitor, there is no such thing. They just don't exist. You have to get a 4K. But luckily, it's I'm not even noticing it. Even though there's quite a lot less resolution. It's fine. It's not affecting me anyway. So that's good.
So, what other highlights have you had with your MacBook Pro? Because you've had it for what, a couple of weeks now?
No,
maybe just over a week.
Barely a week. Yeah, barely a week. Because it shouldn't come. The actual delivery date was like tomorrow, I think. So it actually ran about 10 days ahead, something like that, which was good. But yeah, it was pretty quick to set it up. It normally takes a day or two to set it up, and it was quite easily done. Because there's a lot of things. I mean, the hardest thing, and Aaron will probably understand this, setting up the damn colours and stuff on Rider. Yeah, the rest of the machine, complicated things, no problem at all. Right, getting Rider right was a nightmare.
Yeah, Rider has its own cloud sync rather than going through whatever you use, like iCloud or whatever. So you just have to kind of hope it works, and then end up having the two machines side by side and manually copying the settings over.
That's what I should have done. I thought it would be easy to just start over, actually, and that was a big mistake, because even today I'm still faffing around with colours and stuff. So, but there you go. Rider was the hardest bit. Rider, James, is a fancy IDE that we all use with Unity.
There we go. That was going to be my next question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for the explanation, sir. So it sounds like, all in all, you're happy with your purchase. You're going to get more experience with the screen shortly, but nothing to complain about. All is well. You're enjoying it, and speed is good. Yeah,
it's pretty good. I mean, you still got a dongle. I'm still hanging a dongle off the side of it for USB-A ports and an Ethernet connection, but it's still not dongle free. I mean, to my view, they could have put. I'm just looking at it. So, yeah, I mean, well, it's not actually thick enough to put an Ethernet cable in, but they could have a couple more USB-Cs and a couple of USB-As would have been good. But mustn't grumble.
You've got HDMI at least, and I think the biggest shocker was the SD card slot making a return.
Yeah, why did they bother with the SD card slot?
I still use them quite a bit, but I can't speak for everyone, obviously. But there's certainly, I guess, if you're a photographer, maybe you're using SD cards more than most people. But I thought they would be moving on to new mediums and new wireless transfers, but maybe they're not as reliable.
Yeah, I mean, well, I borrowed my brother's DSLR camera this week, so I could use it for trying astrophotography, and he's got compact flash in it. And I'm thinking, well, I'm actually going to have to plug the camera in over USB, because I don't know if I've got a compact flash adapter anywhere anymore. I think I used to have one about maybe 5-6 years ago. The last time I saw one. And it's the same with it's smart. I mean, similarly, I had a CD I needed to try and get some data off, and it's like, okay, so where did I put my USB DVD ROM drive? Because it used to be you had so many DVD drives because everything had one built in, and now nothing does, because you don't use them that often. And kind of the same with SD cards. They're not particularly brilliant as a format, so usually ends up being a USB dongle or something to adapt to them.
I think that is the one missing thing now, just a nice USB A port. But there's always something. Bring back Firewire. Let's just go the full hog.
I loved Firewire. I was a big fan. But then again, that's what USB-C is anyway. So Basically, USB-C is standardized off what was FireWire 400, became FireWire 800, became Thunderbolt, became USB-C. It's just FireWire on steroids.
Yeah, I think that the assumption with USB-C is a dongle. It will solve all your problems, or you're going to need a hub to connect to it. And I think this is the biggest problem if you are what we would class, I guess, a professional. If as soon as you take your laptop somewhere, if you just haven't got that dongle, so if you haven't got your SD card reader, if you haven't got your HDMI, you're stuck. You're in a mess. And the chances, I mean, I've been to hotels where we've been working and doing presentations and things, and if I've forgotten my HDMI adapter dongle, I'm not plugging into the TV. It's as simple as that. And their wireless setup, even they got this fancy projector with an IP address you can just type in and connect wirelessly. Doesn't work for Macs apparently, but it's fine with Windows. So yeah, the dongle I think is going to be forever a curse for many years to come until wireless sort of becomes the dominating factor and finally becomes stable. Because as much as I have lots of wireless networking around the house, if I can plug it in wired, I will.
Yeah, for Ethernet, for instance, is my go-to because of the speed. And I remember I went to WWDC, Apple's big developer convention in 2013, and that was just after the MacBook Air became the de facto standard for most devs, especially game devs, because it was small, you could carry it anywhere, it was powerful enough to run pretty much anything on. But of course, it didn't have Ethernet. It just had, it was basically Wi-Fi and dongles from USB-A ports. And I'd forgotten my Ethernet dongle, as had many, many devs. And as Apple does normally, they launched the latest version of macOS there to download onto your Macs while you were there, and loads of Ethernet connections for everybody, and a decent wireless connection. But over Ethernet, you got like 10 gigs of download of your new OS in seconds, versus waiting an hour or two, maybe sat there to do it over Wi-Fi. So there was this very big rush to the Apple store nearby, and they ran out of Ethernet adapters within seconds.
A cunning plan.
I'm sure dongles have a nice markup on it as well, a nice bit of margin. I'm sure it doesn't do them any harm.
Well, again, Apple's not got monopoly on the dongles, so I mean, that's the first thing I ordered for my new Mac is a adapter hub, with all the primarily Ethernet and a few USB-A ports, and the number of different ones you can buy, off all the various manufacturers. I suspect they're all the same internally. In fact, Apple doesn't even do a multi one; they only do the specific dongles for Ethernet and USB, I think.
Yeah, they don't do much. They've kind of left that to the rest of the world, haven't they? To sort of crumbs at the table sort of thing. But speaking of hubs, I mean, you can't get a decent USB-C one if you want more than 3 extra ports. Like you can't get 8 ports or something like that. Like a really massive one.
That there's technical reasons behind that though. I read up on it because I was looking for at least a 4-port USB-C hub. And apparently, because of the way the Thunderbolt chips work, you can't just do a simple split like you do on USB-A. You actually have to analyze the data, because you basically got 40 gigabits of data coming through that's then got to be evenly balanced between your ports. So that requires quite a chip load that no one's actually done the chips for yet. So most of the hubs you could get would be a pass-through USB-C or a charging port USB-C, and sort of diverting off for USB-A. And then eventually there's starting to become like 2-way splitter USB-C ones now, where there is a chip that will do it. It's only just sort of starting to arrive.
Right.
But I was quite pleased to see with the new MacBooks, they've done a USB chip per port for the USB-C ports.
Right.
So you're not splitting your bandwidth. You've basically got 120 gigabits of bandwidth across 3 ports.
So it's 3 good ports at least.
Yeah.
But it does highlight the need is you need as many of these ports on the laptop as possible. Because, I mean, for work, I've got the M1 MacBook Air, which, it runs great. But there's only 2 USB-C ports on it. So one's for power, which doesn't. That means you've got one for whatever else you're going to plug in.
Yeah. At least you've got an actual power connector now separately.
MagSafe.
Which I'm very pleased with, because I had MagSafe on my earlier MacBook and loved it. It saved me a couple of times, and I've seen laptops go across the room from people tripping over power cords. And it's even if the actual screen survives, invariably the actual port gets bent and ripped out, and that's it. It's it's a motherboard job.
So I believe you've also invested in this new MacBook Pro era we find ourselves in here.
Oh yes. Unfortunately, mine's arriving a bit later due to interesting shenanigans with the bank. They basically being a bit slow at trying to let me actually buy one with my own money. But it is on order, so I will hopefully get mine before Christmas.
Well, that'd be good, wouldn't it? You got to have it for Christmas.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, the problem is in expectation or as an excuse to buy the new one. I let my brother's fiance take my 13-inch MacBook Pro M1, which I bought last year, and I've been using it great, but it's like not critical at the moment. So I'll let her borrow it for her trip back to the UK. And I'm like, I've no longer got a portable Mac, and this new one isn't going to turn up until December. I've got a problem.
Yeah, you should get it. You should get it pretty soon. I reckon it's days away. It's also a fact that if you keep refreshing the Apple orders page, it goes quicker.
Yes, I've only been doing that every couple of hours. I may need to do that a bit faster.
More, do it more. It rings a little bell.
Actually, I'll do it now. Just check.
keep doing it every few seconds, and they get a little message goes through. Tim Cook gets it and says, "Oh, Aaron's really waiting."
My order is being processed.
And he rings.
26th November to 3rd of December.
Yeah.
Everyone hitting the F5 key on a website. What could go wrong?
Yeah. But the thing is, unless you've actually got one of the new Macs, you don't have an F5 key. You just have a touch bar.
Yeah. Well, you'd be using a different keyboard though by this point, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I've only just I've had to replace my favorite keyboard recently as well, because it wore out and I couldn't get a spare to repair it with. Because I'm a massive fan of Logitech's K760 keyboard, which is one they did for just a short time. It's a wonderful Bluetooth keyboard with solar power, and really good feel. It's very similar to the Mac keyboard layout, and it's done for Macs, but it's also got 3 function keys, so you can quickly switch between 3 different Bluetooth devices. So you can hop between it's basically like a KVM, well, just for the keyboard controller. So you can hop between 3 different devices. So you've got that, your iPhone or your iPad connected up to it as well. And then when you're not working on the Mac, you can switch. But the thing, it being solar powered, I never had to recharge it. And the first one I had, the keys wore out. Actually, no, the batteries wore out, so it wouldn't charge anymore. The second-hand one, took it apart because the keys were knackered on it. Found out the batteries are the standard Eneloop things that you can use. Swapped it in, and unfortunately, they stopped doing it after a couple of years, which is crazy because it was their best keyboard ever.
Do you remember what I was telling you about hoarding things, Aaron?
Yeah. So now I have one scrap K760 now, and I had to dig out my old Apple Bluetooth keyboard instead.
I'm on Keychron now, and I'm pretty happy with that.
Right.
Keychron K2 is really good, really good.
Orange Escape key.
Yeah, Orange Escape key.
And after the podcast we recorded a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about this keyboard. A few minutes later, after it finished recording, I had a photo of this Orange Escape key. And I have to say, as escape keys go, this was pretty nice.
I mean, it glows as well, of course, as the colour cycling goes through it. So it's not just orange; it's glowing orange. It's all sorts of things going on with it. It's really.
It looks like it's the perfect key for when you know you might make a mistake. Escape.
Well, that sounds like it was designed to play a keyboard. I think it was called Steel Battalion, the big mech game which had the custom
Oh, yeah,
stick controllers,
yeah.
which had an eject button, and the game was done such that if your mech was trashed or was about to explode and you didn't eject, it deleted your save game. So it's permadeath, basically.
Lovely.
And I can just imagine Tony's escape keys like that. You know, he's playing like a keyboard version of this, and oh no, it's going, hit escape. otherwise it's all new.
Steel Battalion. That was the original Xbox, I think.
I think, wasn't it PlayStation 1 or something? It was way back.
I've got a feeling it
might have been, yeah. But I just remember the custom controller. I actually saw one, and it's like, my God, that's insane.
Yeah, for the Xbox, the original one. A vertical tank, a bipedal, heavily armoured mecha. It sounds like something you need some really serious controller action with. And an eject button.
Yeah.
So the game came with its own controller?
Oh, no, I think that was extra.
No, that was extra, yeah. I think they designed the controller first and then said, okay, now we've got to write a game.
Yeah. No, it was serious stuff. It really was. I mean, this wasn't just a controller. It was like you properly sat there with buttons everywhere.
It made some of the flight control sticks look wimpy, but it was a proper like surround you kind of mech panel kind of thing. It was pretty crazy. Yeah.
It's like you get some people who play flight simulators and they're there with the flight stick, that single joystick, and it may have yoke controls and all the rest of it on there. And then they'll use the keyboard. But then you've got like the next tier where it virtually surrounds you with buttons and things. Even Rail Simulations is heavily invested in huge controllers with vast array of buttons. And this was along those lines. It was a serious bit of kit.
It was equivalent of the F1 simulator rigs, but for a mech game, basically. It was that level of silly kind of thing for your average home user anyway on an Xbox.
Imagine buying a controller just for one game.
I've done it. Although the game came with it. I've ended up with a few weird controllers. The strangest one was one I bought for a fighting game on PlayStation 2, I think it was. It must have been PlayStation 2. And it was this sort of dome type box that sat on the ground, and it had two strings coming out of it on pulleys with hand grips.
Is this a circus game or a fighting game?
No, it's a fighting game. So you basically got a fighting game where as you do your hand movements, it's tracking the movement of the pulleys and how long the lines are to work out where your hands are. So it's a real-time fighting game. And there's a bit of tension on the line, so you're not you have to actually put some effort in to keep your arms up and so on. And they had two games with it, and no other games I think ever got released for it. I can't remember for the life of me what the name of it was. But it had a really horrible design flaw. Is if you're punching in real life with a simulation sort of for a game, obviously you want to keep the TV long enough away that you're not going to actually hit TV. And I suspect some of the Wii remote games had similar issues. If you snap extend your arm to its full extent, you tear your elbow joint, because the weight of your hand and forearm going forwards and suddenly stopping has to be retained, has to be stopped by the rest of your arm. So you start tearing ligaments and stuff in your joints if you're not careful.
That's quite a problem.
Yeah, I mean, this is a thing with controller design, and I think is why Meta or Facebook VR or whatever they end up renaming it to will fail, is 25% of people throw up when they put a VR headset on. So all you need are enough stories of people throwing up trying to join Meta, and it's going to be, this isn't really that great a thing for me. I don't want to risk throwing up all the time. Thank you.
I do remember when the Nintendo Wii came out, and this was like, this console sold ridiculously well. I mean, insanely well. And I think it was mostly people buying it, playing Wii bowling, and then putting it away and probably not touching it very much after that. I think for the vast majority of people, it was like casual gaming. Yeah, this is great. This is something you bring out when the family comes around and we can all have a game of bowling or whatever else, but then it would be put away again. But the videos of people playing this stuff, particularly Wii Tennis, I think was the fun one, where people would be doing like the overheads. But this was before the controllers had the nice meaty strap and the casing around the remote, which came later. So people were literally throwing these controllers to do this really... And they obviously didn't need to do that. The controller, I could literally sit down and go... Yeah. And that would do the exact same action as someone really going to throw the thing hard. But of course, they lost grip and would let go. So there was many shots of, videos of people doing this overhead shot or some equivalent, the remote coming out of their hand at great velocity and going straight into their nice big TV screen with a great big impact mark, as you can imagine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Things like that are always learned by engineering. Is one of these things is you learn things by, okay, how are people going to break it? And it's the same with writing software. You write it and then a million people play it and you realize actually, that's there's no way we could have tested for that with only 20 people testing it or whatever. It takes a million people testing it to really break something. So it's one of these things. Nintendo have been through that before when Mario Party came out on was it N64? I think it was. But there's the one basically where you had to. One of the games was you'd have to. You're supposed to rotate the stick, but people found that by doing it with your palm was faster for one of the mini games or more of the mini games. So you like going like this, and people were suing Nintendo because they basically worn holes in the middle of their hands because of the little nub on the stick. To the point where Nintendo started giving gloves out with Mario Party.
Wow.
So it's little things like that you learn only after you let the sort of the real people test it.
Developers always play. The developers always play the game properly, and the gamers get it, and they just ruin it by playing it wrongly. It was worse. The more complicated your game is, the worse that this phenomena is. I mean, it was pretty bad for us writing adventures because we would have a design that said you do this, you do this, you do this, and then you do this, and you escape this room, and you do this, and we would write it along those lines, and then a player who would come along who didn't know the solution and try all sorts of things, and the whole thing would just fall to bits, and we just couldn't believe it. And I guess that's it's the same with all software, but it seems to be magnified with adventure games where there's so much granularity of interaction. It was a nightmare.
Yes, and the famous goat, of course.
Yeah, well, that wasn't a bug though. That was design.
That was intentional, cryptic. Puzzle solving, definitely. But talking of Broken Sword, celebrating an anniversary again. 25 years?
It was 25 years, yeah. I mean, I got it wrong. I was like, I think I was like 5 days ahead when I tweeted something about it, and then
you're excited.
Then, well, a few people did it. I mean, I don't know when it came out. I can't remember at all. I didn't even know it was 25 years. And someone posted, "It's 25 years today." So I kind of retweeted it and said, "Yay!" And then, like 5 days later, and like everyone else came on and said, "It really is now." So,
but someone heavily involved with that game. Does it feel like 25 years ago?
Well, it does now. I'm trying to write about it and remember what happened. It really is a foggy. 25 years is quite a long time, and a lot's gone on since. So, does it feel like 25 years? I mean, I suppose it does. Yeah, in some ways. I mean, the problem is, if any of us now think back to what we were doing 25 years ago, there's key little things that you remember, and what you did on average day is long gone. Although you can probably be reminded of anything. That's the funny thing about it. So I mean, I'm going around at the moment talking to as many people as I can who were there, and everyone remembers something slightly different. So between us, I'm actually building up a reasonable picture of what we were doing and how we did things, But it's I mean, 25 years. It's a fair old time, isn't it?
I think a lot of the projects back then as well. I can remember what project I was doing and what events happened based on what project I was doing, but I can't remember what year it was.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I don't have any concept of actual dates as such, just what project I was doing at the time.
yeah. And then you lose track of what the time spans tend to contract and warp and all sorts of things, and sometimes entire projects you can get in the wrong order. And you know what we were arguing about which office we finished, which city even we finished Beneath a Steel Sky in. And I remain convinced that we moved across to York before Steel Sky was finished. But I was talking to Steve Ince about it, and he says it's not true at all. We finished in Hull, and maybe the CD32 one, the extra one we did on the end, that was maybe done in York. But you see, I've got all these memories of us finishing it in York and being really annoyed because we timed the office move. You kind of go, well, this game's going to be finished. The lease is up on the office in Hull in, say, 6 months' time. So we need to not renew it. So we need to find a York office now. So we did that. And of course, the game is scheduled to be finished in 2 months' time. Well, of course, your game is never going to be finished in 2 months' time if you say it is. So, my memory is that it all dragged on, and we were like, instead of a leisurely move across to York, we were like, oh no, we're finishing the game and we have to move everything across. It's going to be a nightmare. So we had like a whole weekend of frantically ferrying stuff backwards and forwards across the two cities, and then finishing it in York in quite the opposite frame of mind as we wanted to be. But apparently none of that is true. So where did I get this?
Like that?
Where do I get those memories from?
Yeah, there's this whole phenomenon, isn't there, of people having false memories of videos that never existed, and films that never existed, or events that never existed, and like whole swathes of people are convinced that such and such a movie happened, or such and such a person was in a movie when they never were, or something. Maybe it's something like that.
Yeah.
We're in a simulation, and they've just been quietly editing.
Well, maybe that's the case. Maybe these are all false memories implanted into Blade Runner is one of my favorite films, and maybe there's more truth to it than you think there is.
Well, I'm thankful technology enhancing photos is better than what we see in Blade Runner.
It's still funny.
It just zooms in a little bit and then enhance.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
It's such a great scene, though, isn't it? Everything about it is good. The way it looks, even just the sound effects of that scene is just amazing. It's so good, so good. I often pull it up on YouTube, and watch it.
Yeah, there's a little truth to it now as well, in that if you assume, again, science fiction is always about what ifs, isn't it? If you assume that in this particular future where Blade Runner is, that cameras gather as much data as possible, but only present you with a snapshot of it for the actual photograph, then you've got more data to actually dig into when you actually work on the photo. That's actually not far off now. Like on the iPhone 13, for instance, when you take portrait mode shot, or if you take one of the new cinema mode, for instance, it doesn't just take the picture you see, it's actually taking the picture at all depth levels. And then later you can come along and actually refocus on a different depth level because it's captured basically a 3D image. Not quite, but it's essentially you've got all these layers of focus that aren't visible in the shot you've taken, but are if you want to dig into it later. So you can come along to a photo you've taken. No, actually focus on that instead. Which is equivalent to that zoom in Blade Runner. It's not it's not a million years out, really, is it? When how far will it be before we can do that with a photo, because it's taken a complete LiDAR scan of the room and everything around it,
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe someone could remake that scene, but instead of saying, focus 10/4, he has to say, hey Siri, refocus 10/4.
Yeah.
Hey Siri. Yeah. Hey Siri. Hey Siri.
Well, that's the interesting thing, though, is that the user interface is the bit that lets it down, rather than the technology of what it can do. The user interface is where he's having to give it coordinates, which are some arbitrary numbers, where he says, "Oh, focus in on the room at the back, or focus in on the person in the room at the back," which should, by the time you've got the technology to do that level of sort of, photographic capture, you've probably got more human interface kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, a few minutes before, he's already had a nice English conversation with his lift elevator thing, hasn't he?
Yeah.
There's something to be said for a mouse. Which would make Blade Runner so much easier. But that reminds me of a Star Trek movie. I think it was number 4, where they travel back in time and you got Scotty talking to the mass computer.
I have actually seen somebody do that.
Oh, no.
I was.
Hold on, this is where we've got scrambled memories again, surely.
No. This is real. I worked in my early days. I worked in a recording studio as a studio engineer, and it was in a hotel. Basically, it was like a combination recording studio hotel that the husband and wife were running. He ran the recording studio, she ran the hotel, and they'd have various guests would stay either or both, for recording and or just staying at the hotel. And they had some friends staying who lived in the middle of nowhere, didn't have any technology barring a basic landline phone. They didn't even have a TV, and even in the 80s, that was still quite a big deal. And we get the call. We get told there's a phone call for her. She's in the studio talking to us, and we get told there's a phone call for her. And no one says, "Oh yeah, this phone." And so she picks up the mouse and actually, thinking it's the phone, and goes, "Hello."
That's pretty good.
And we had to. So no, that's the phone there. Don't worry about that. But again, if you're totally abstracted from technology, what looks like a phone to you?
It reminds me actually of something that happened back in the 80s when we had Spectrums and stuff, and the games came on cassettes and all that business. James won't remember cassettes probably, but Aaron will. But
I remember cassettes. I had a Commodore 64. It was all tape drives in Europe and the UK, none of this fancy floppy disk stuff.
Okay, so you were right there with us. So, but
you had fancy tape decks for Commodore 64s that didn't just give you lots and lots of errors.
Oh yes, it had turbo mode, and it was so quick. While I went and got myself a drink, and then came back, and it still wasn't done. But fine. Yeah. But go on, Tony, cassette.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were all playing. We were all like 13, and we were all playing, swapping cassettes and buying games on cassettes and stuff, and. Someone's dad came in. I think it was in a shop or something. We were looking at these cassettes, deciding what to buy. And someone's dad was with us, and he knew nothing about computers at all. And he said he picked up a tape of a bit of software and said, "How long does it give you?" As in, the length of the cassette was linked to how long you could use the computer for with that particular program. You see what I mean?
That makes sense.
Yeah. So you'd get 30 minutes on this particular cassette. There's a fundamental misunderstanding of how computers work.
Yeah.
I had an inane curiosity when I was younger to go, I wonder what this sounds like. So I'd put it in my hi-fi, and of course you'd just go and all that stuff. But then, of course, and I hadn't learnt my lesson, because then when CDs came out, what does the CD sound like? Well, it's a data track. Now, luckily, I think consoles like the Sega Saturn, one of the tracks was dedicated to, this is meant to be played in a Sega Saturn console, or, words to that effect. But that spoiled my fun. But yeah, the first time when I had the volume a bit too loud, yeah. I didn't make that mistake again.
You don't want it too loud, but it was quite a nice sound, though, don't you think? I mean, a nice Spectrum game loading. It's a nice sound, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, I mean, the cassettes may have gone away as a data format, but obviously various people listening to the sound of the data on the cassettes spawned Acid House. So, it kept going.
Yeah. And the little flashing on the border.
This is the odd thing as well, because if I've ever emulated Commodore 64... and it's loading in real time, some of them have a toggle where you can actually hear the data stream and the sound it would normally make. I mean, why? I wanted it switched on, and I'm not sure why. Because it's not like I'm not listening to like beautiful music. It's not like Mozart or anything. But yeah, there's something. Maybe it's just nostalgia and knowing it was from the time.
Yeah,
I like to hear the sound.
Why would you play retro games if it wasn't for the nostalgia? And if you want you might as well be properly immersive with the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it does make sense.
I want the sound, but I mean, I like it. I think it's a good sound. You know, it was slow. I mean, it's too quick these days. You know, even a CD. If you play a CD, imagine it sounds awful because it'll be too fast, won't it? But it was. I mean, it was slow as anything on a cassette. I mean, it was like 14.4 modem type rate, I suppose. I don't really know what kind of rate it was.
Lower than that.
Lower,
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty low data rate. I did some because I used to use the tape loading port on my Apple II because you could basically access it directly, and essentially all you're doing is basically pinging what's essentially a speaker backwards and forwards, just on and off, and just modulating that for your signal. But the actual data rate you did for it was actually pretty low. You know.
Yeah, I guess it was,
and it was. Because, you know, you've only got a one kilohertz chip decoding the data. So you can't actually go that fast because you've got to actually decode all that data coming in as binary.
Yeah, it would have been real slow. Yeah, you're right. But you know, you picked up the patterns in the data. You know, you could tell the difference between program code, which would be pretty random and white, and then there'd be like level data and sprites and stuff where it would be more. There'd be like uniform layers of particular numbers, so you'd get a very different sound, you know. And you got to, especially when you're making games and you were constantly making new versions and trying to make masters and stuff, you'd actually get to recognize quite well the flow and of the actual music of the data, as you might say. Yeah,
it's an early version of viewing the Matrix, isn't it? Yeah,
I do remember when I remember when I had my Commodore 64, it was quite late in the life of the computer. So when I was buying like the magazine, it would come with a Commodore 64 tape on with probably like 3 games on one side and a few on the other side. But the weird novelty of you didn't know where game number 2 was on that tape or game number 3. So you had to run the first title, see where the end point was once that had loaded up, then write down in pen the tape position. And then you do the same again for number 3. So when you wanted to play game 3 the next time, you just fast forward to that point. None of this select a trap business. You had to find it first.
Yeah.
Well, designing games that had more than what you could load into memory as data on tape was fun as well, because you've got to design it as linear as possible because you've got no random access to the tape. So, basically play, now load level 1, level 2, and it's pulling in the data. So there's a couple of big adventure games tried that, and it was just such a faff because you get any sort of loading error partway through, and that's it. You're stuck because you've got no save game, of course.
Yeah, I remember playing Simon the Sorcerer on the Acorn Archimedes, and that came on several floppy disks. And as you went through different sections, now insert disc number 3. Oh, okay. Then you move a bit forward. No, insert disc number 6. Oh. And unfortunately, I think it was disc number 7. That's where it all fell apart, because then I found out the floppy disk was corrupted. So I got my money back. I got it sent back. But still, these are the things you don't have to deal with today. It's that video CD. If anyone can remember that format. Came on 2 CDs, man. You'd watch half the movie and then you'd have to get up. That was your perfect pee break moment, or grab a cup of tea, because you've got to change the disc, and laser disc even before that was very much like that too. And that wasn't even a small disc. That was a mightily large cylinder thing.
Laserdisc at least was a very, very nice format visually, the amount of data it actually had. It was very,
well, it was analog video.
It was particularly compressed, but it was quite surprising.
Analog video and audio, and then it only got to sort of digital audio when Dolby Digital came along. But yeah, I've got my one Laserdisc of Terminator 2. Never played it. I just wanted to show my friends when they come round. This was how we used to watch movies, and here it is, one massive disc. And by the way, there's 2 of them. It blows people's minds if they've not experienced that.
That's interesting. I've not got a video CD at all. A video disc. Sorry, a laser disc.
I never ever owned Laserdisc, the format. It was very expensive at the time.
Very, yeah.
But video CD I did, and I think that was more for the fact of I had a Rainbow Runner add-on card for my Matrix Mystique graphics card, and it supported MPEG-1 hardware playback, and it came with some DVD software. Video CD software. Yeah. So you put the disc in, you could watch the movie, but I wouldn't have brought the format otherwise. But I've still got the 8 CDs for some reason. The films. Not the best quality, but at the time, compared to VHS, to have a digital signal that wasn't going to degrade, that was quite an appeal.
It was, well, the thing is, it came up against DVD, which was ridiculously expensive at the time. And it was convenience versus quality. You know, this, CD video was a lot easier to get because it was also a lot easier to pirate. So, you know, everybody was doing knockoff films on CD, whereas DVDs were still expensive. And most people don't. I mean, look at something like Netflix. You watch Netflix most of the time. Actually, even if you've got decent bandwidth in your home, the actual video quality is usually terrible on Netflix. It just JPEG like crazy a lot of the time, even when you've got decent bandwidth. So just the fact that you can watch the film when you want and whatever, you know, cheaply or whatever, always seems to beat spectacular quality. You know, otherwise everyone would be investing in home IMAX cinemas, you know.
It's amazing how many video formats there were. And it wasn't until I watched a YouTube channel called TechMoan, and he tends to cover a lot of these video and audio formats, and the video ones in particular. So there was video CD, which was basically MPEG-1 video on a CD, and it usually came with 2 CDs. But then there was another one called CD video, which isn't a bit confusing between different formats. Yeah. And there's many.
Yeah, and there was DivX or DivX, which was the rental one. Yeah, that was the rental one, wasn't it? That self-destructed after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, and also the pirate format of choice, DivX. That was the one you could get a whole film on a single CD.
Yeah,
in a DVD-like resolution.
Yeah,
pirates were always good at there was also compressing things down, weren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all driven by what people will go for. It's like the whole thing of the porn industry pretty much driving what formats were successful, for instance, and so on. You know, basically VHS won because Sony didn't want porn actors or porn directors using Betamax cameras. So despite TV studios preferring it, home video tended to end up being more, you know, sort of suddenly rather popular because on VHS, because porn was available on VHS.
Back to Blade Runner, computer, focus, quadrant, 10-4.
Yeah. Again, any technology that, you know, will at some point be, you know, the porn industry will go, can we use that? I mean, I was doing motion control games on the Mac, and we just we released Toy Sight and got an Apple Design Award for it, and then got a call. Our publisher got a call from some publishers of porn games saying, "Can we do camera controlled games for porn?" And rather stupidly, my publishers asked me, you know, and anything like that. And whenever I'm asked, I will at least consider whether it can be done, not whether it should be done. And I said, yes, technically, but you are going to have to get me the porn stars to work with. And we decided not to. So we did a cancer game instead. We did a thing for a medical company trying to promote a new anti-cancer drug, and did a game for showing using that at medical shows and stuff with it. So fortunately, we chose well, I think, that time.
That's quite a range, though, and I don't think many people can have such
a
history.
You'd be surprised at some of the weird stuff that you know you get asked to write when you're doing stuff. It's, you know, it does get pretty wild. I mean, I've done when I was doing the Amos stuff, I was helping people do not just flight simulators, but people actually controlling real combat aircraft through flight training. Basically, I was helping them do a network of Amigas that were teaching air traffic controllers how to guide combat aircraft. And at the same time, I was actually writing Jet Strike. So I'm writing what the CD32 gamer called the most Boise video game ever, while people with actual weapons on wings were being guided around by people who were using software I'd helped develop on Amigas. You know? So it's always kind of scary.
Gosh. So, Aaron, the last podcast you were in, you were mentioning about the CD32 and its myriad of quirks. What other sort of formats of that sort of time period have you had the, shall we dare say, pleasure of dealing with? I'm sure they can't have all been quite as epic as the CD32 setup.
You'd be surprised. I worked on the Jaguar as well.
Oh wow! Okay.
So after I shut down my company, well, the last thing I was working on was CD32. I went to work for a company up in Newcastle, who were doing Jaguar games, and that was quite fun. It's actually quite a fun console to work on. It had some very nice features, and I was working with the DSP chips, which were great. But they were desperately trying to get their Jaguar CD thing out at the time, and all the sort of the CD, the DVD playing, the video playing sort of stuff, rather than just the games and stuff off it. And there was all sorts of issues going on with Atari at the time. Yeah, it was good. It was a fun little company, but unfortunately, because we were working on Jaguar, it was doomed, kind of thing, you know. But it got morphed into another company, which basically sort of bought them up, and I kind of moved on. I did one job interview in my entire life, basically, and just got bought by different companies.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
That's not too bad. Are those Apple headphones you've got there, Aaron?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
I treated myself last Christmas because, fortunately, you can't hear it. But where I am, I'm literally on the plaza of the town. I'm a couple of floors up, but the plaza's just outside, so it's kind of noisy. And I've had noise reducing headphones before, but the Apple Airpods Maxes are absolutely brilliant for it. And the weird bit, I've only recently experienced the whole what they call it, the new sound thing they do, the spatial sound.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very off-putting, because you think you've got your headphones on, so you're basically working on the basis of everything is quiet, I can't hear anything from outside, I'm not making any noise, so I'm not annoying the neighbors, so I can turn my music up full, I can watch this film on full blast. And then you move your head, and it sounds like the sound is actually coming from the TV. Because the way the spatial sound works is it emulates the sound coming from the specific point where it is in, as far as the movie is concerned. So if you move your head, it basically it adjusts as if you're listening to it from that point. So it makes you think, well, crap, the sound's actually coming from the TV. I've been blasting this out and annoying the neighbors for the last hour and a half, you know. And it turns out you take your headphones off, and it's like, no, it isn't. Okay, that's good. It's just very weird.
Interesting. And hopefully I'm not the only person that wants to put the headphones on if I'm worried about disturbing someone. I still go through that check of...
Oh, yeah. But there is a slight flaw with these, because if you take them off, it actually cuts the sound off.
Yeah.
Because they detect they're on your ears. You can take them off in such a way that you can listen, you know, without actually cutting the sound off. But also the range is good as well, because it's a pretty good Bluetooth range on them. So I can wander anywhere around the house while listening to stuff. I have to remember, if I take a loo break, though, during a podcast or recording or during a Zoom call or anything, to take my headphones off, because they put a microphone into them as well. So.
That's too much detail, isn't it?
Yeah. It's one of the dangers of modern technology. It's one of these things. You've got to remember things like that. Yeah.
I've got the Sony XM4s, which are really good for noise cancellation. But I think the reason I went for those over anything else was I'm an Android user. I'm not really... I've got MacBook Pros, that's probably my Apple thing, and I've got an Apple TV. But my phone's Android, I've got a Windows computer. But when I connect headphones, it's going to be to my phone mostly. So having LDAC support, which is just less compression, basically wireless. The XM4s are perfect for that, and unfortunately the Apple ones, of course, want to be Apple and be AAC, which is absolutely fine. But as an Android user, you've got a little bit more choice there.
I think Tony's uses Sony's as well, don't you?
I've got some M4s, yeah, but I have them tied to the computer, and I find it such a faff to move them across different devices that they're just for work. So if I'm looking at the screen, I might use the M4s, but I don't do anything else with them. But these are new AirPod 3s, and the beauty of them is, I mean, they're discreet for this kind of thing, and you can walk about outside with them and still look normal. And you can they switch between Apple devices very easily, unlike the Sonys. So you end up having both, big expensive Sony ones and small expensive Apple ones to cover all bases. But I'm quite pleased with these, actually. I mean, I had the AirPod ones, but these ones are like in a different league. I mean, they're not pros. They're just the base AirPod now, but they're more or less. But they're really good. I mean, the sound is absolutely terrific. Yeah, absolutely faultless.
They're not noise cancelling on the normal ones. It's only the pros that are noise cancelling, isn't it?
They're not noise cancelling, but there's just the sound quality is just really, really good. Really good. Much better than I expected it to be. I mean, sometimes I'm thinking, are these the M4s? Or the I'm going like this. Oh, it's the Apple ones. It's they're really very good.
And
but the problem with the M4s is I can't hear the doorbell. The doorbell is really loud, and with the M4s, I miss Amazon. So I have to, which is a regular occurrence, Amazon visiting. But so these
you
ones
need a smart doorbell.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a smart doorbell.
Why not, Aaron?
Yeah. Well, there are HomeKit ones now, which you'd be less worried about. But given all the stuff about like the Google ones or whatever it was, can't remember what they're called now, the original sort of video ones, and the Amazon ones, basically reporting all their data back as well as to you, it's just like, yeah, it's just the level of trust there, just not for it all. Plus, there was a massive spate of burglaries in the UK where burglars were going, oh, smart doorbell, they've got some decent stuff to nick. So, it's and using they're obviously not at home because, the way they're responding when you press the doorbell and they're not at home. Right, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want Amazon listening to anything I do, so I don't have any of that stuff from those people. But also this is the way this building is organised. I couldn't have a smart one anyway. So, but I do need to hear that bell when it goes off.
Well, I'm sure you can get a nice wireless doorbell where you just plug it in somewhere right near your face, with a big light or something glowing. Yeah,
but it's one of these ones where it's a bunch of flats, so it's someone else's stuff. It's not. There's three numbers on it, and one of them's mine, and it's not. None of that stuff belongs to me. So I mean, I could sellotape something onto it probably, but
yeah.
Okay.
But again, with delivery drivers as well, you've got to be so fast to respond to it before they tap the doorbell and run away that you've got to sit right in front of you or hear it.
No, I have a video doorbell, and I literally do see him run. It's like, hold on a minute. And of course, when you're working from home, chances are now you are going to be in, but they expect you to go down there really quick, otherwise they're gone, or they leave it in a really. We've left this parcel in a safe place. No, you haven't. You've literally left it wide open, right in front of the front door for everybody to see. There was one delivery I had there I wasn't in on that one occasion. Must have been there for 24 hours, just on the front doorstep for all to see. And I live on a corner of a road, so there's like loads of people walking past and cars driving past. It was still there. I am amazed, thankfully.
Yeah. I mean, in the States, it's a big thing, is people stealing Amazon packages from doorways and stuff, to the point where someone jokingly said, well, if you've got rubbish you want to get rid of, just put it in an Amazon box and leave it out on your porch.
I think it was Amazon that were hoping you'd have a smart doorbell, but if someone knocked on the door, and if you were out, and it was like an Amazon delivery, Prime, of course. You could let you could open the door for them remotely, let them in so they could just put it inside the house for you. Isn't that a nice thought? What could possibly go wrong there?
Now, if Amazon were training their delivery drivers well, giving them a reasonable amount of time to deliver and paying them properly, giving them proper rest breaks and treating them like decent, properly well looked after employees, then maybe, yeah, because you'd think, well, vetted them at least. These are people they trust and that trust them, and it's all great. But they're basically whoever's stupid enough to do this job, because we're going to treat them like, rude word in here, basically. You basically that doesn't give you the level of trust as a customer either. It's like these are, generally speaking, they're pretty nice people most of the time. All my delivery drivers are generally great, but if the company's treating them terribly, you'll get far more bad eggs than you would if they're actually looking after them as well as vetting them. Because if the company doesn't care, then the drivers don't.
Yeah. And of course, they want to get their deliveries completed and go home and put their feet up. And I can't say I blame them. I don't want them stood outside for 2 minutes waiting for me to come and answer the door.
I mean, again, technology spin-offs. There's always something where you could design something to solve a problem. So the problem Amazon delivery drivers have got is, what do we do with stuff when you're not at home and so on? So we design a parcel firing cannon on the back of the truck. So that they don't have to worry about getting it into a safe place somewhere around the front of your house. They can just fire it over the top into your backyard.
This is like Paperboy Reloaded.
Yeah. Imagine Paperboy with a bazooka.
Yeah. Write it right now, Aaron.
Yeah.
Well, Amazon were also talking about, of course, drone delivery as well.
They've had to stop it in various places because the drones keep getting shot down.
Was this in America, perchance?
Actually, Australia, I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah. But also certain drones go across flight paths of bird colonies that don't like them and get mobbed by birds. There's all sorts of problems with drone deliveries. Someone showed me a photo from Milton Keynes the other day where they use these little driving drone robots that drive along the pathways with your pizza delivery and so on. And there's a traffic jam of them because it's obviously a Friday night and everyone wants their food deliveries, and they've all ended up getting traffic jammed on this park pathway because there's just so many of them driving around.
Look, I'm a geek. Technology is great, but there's just sometimes you need the human touch.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
I don't believe the drone thing at all. Having got a little DJI drone, you were saying, Aaron, the birds are a real problem. Seagulls and stuff in this city, you got the seagulls don't like them at all. You got to watch for it all the time. So if these things were just automated doing a job, it would be a nightmare because you've got to be watching the thing. The law.
Worst thing is
the law. Sorry, the law in the UK is that with drones, you have to be able to see the drone at all times. So if it's an Amazon drone, there's not a person watching it. It's just going to be automated, isn't it? So it's going to run into all sorts of trouble.
There's also the authorities are catching on to how dangerous they can be. There was a story on in Gadget, I think it was the other day. Actually, no, it's on the BBC. There was apparently an American power substation was attacked by a drone in 2020, and they're just releasing the details of it. And luckily, the pilot of the drone was doing it by eye only, and had taken the camera off it and the video feed stuff off it because he didn't want to be traced back. But he basically was flying a drone with rope and strips of aluminium dangling from it to fly into a power substation, try and short it out. And luckily, because he was flying it by eye, he missed and crashed into a building at the side of it. Otherwise, it could have taken out several large, quite a large area by knocking this substation out. And the other thing is, you think about disaster scenario, minor disaster scenario. If your Amazon delivery involves food stuff, or if you're doing flying food deliveries, and it's across a regular path, birds are clever, especially birds like crows and so on. They will learn that these things have got food in, So they will attack them to take them down because these things won't defend themselves. So you will end up at some point where some of these flight paths will just become impractical because the birds will just attack them for the food that's in.
Oh, I thought you were going to say at some point we'll have drones with machine guns.
At some point, there will be. It's the recoil's a bit of a problem. You're more likely to have drones with rockets as an actual attack weapon.
I'm glad you've put so much thought into that.
Things come up. I think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's my job.
But
if you're designing games, that's a basic thing you do. You think about the what ifs. You're given a scenario. Okay, now what's the practicals and what you need to change and so on for that scenario.
Okay, last question of the podcast. Self-driving cars. Please tell me what the point is, because if the car's driving itself, but you still are told you have to have your hands on the wheel, what's the point?
Well,
I'm not saying anyone should drive a self-driving car and take their hands off the wheel. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the whole philosophy behind self-driving cars. Unless I can sit in the back, have a glass of wine, and the car will just drive me home or wherever, what's the point?
Let me talk about this because I had a Aaron will know our good friend Tunsa in Canada, and I had a week been driven around in a Tesla Model X in Canada a year or so ago, just before lockdown, and I was super impressed by this thing because it wasn't self-driving, but it was doing a few things, clever things, like it was steering on the motorway and things like that, which is pretty weird. Thing to experience. It was following the flow of the motorway and stuff on its own, which was quite impressive. But what really impressed me about this Tesla was there was a Teslas in particular are way ahead of everybody else's. I think at the moment with sort of general awareness of the road. And what the Teslas do is they know they've got a pretty good map around them, especially on a motorway, of where all the other cars are, not just in front of you but behind you. And this particular Tesla, it had spotted a pickup truck coming at us from like that way behind us, yeah, and this truck was snowing, okay, because it was Canada, going into the Rocky Mountains, and this truck was going to hit us, or looked like it was going to hit us, and we didn't know about this. And the Tesla rings a bell. It says something bad's going to happen, and it actually dodged itself to the right slightly because it thought this pickup truck was going to hit us, and it would have. We wouldn't have known anything until this thing had hit us, more than likely, because it was a blind spot sort of situation. So I was super impressed by that. Because the car, you make mistakes.
Tony's buffered out for me.
Yeah, I think Tesla cut him off.
Yeah, this is a classic sort of technology boundary thing with self-driving cars. Is that they're not fully self-driving yet because there's still people driving. And when you get the point where all cars are self-driving, then they're perfect. There's no problem because it's easy, basically. But when you've got self-driving cars having to mix with people, it's that much more difficult and that much more problematic.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Aaron. The same goes to Tony, wherever he is.
In a Tesla work camp now. He's making Model X's.
Well, take care, Aaron, and we'll see you all again next time.
See you, Jamie. Yeah, see you.